Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt, and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Stress Podcast. As always, I'm sitting here in my little office in Lake Tahoe, and I'm really excited to share an hour with our next podcast guest. And today it's Christopher Lee Maher.
Wow, you got it right.
Yeah, did I?
You got it right. Yeah,
Good.
actually, you're the first podcast host to ever get it right.
Amazing. Well, so excited.
I'm going to give you a golf clap.
Thank you. How are you today, Christopher?
I'm excellent. Yeah, I had a really good day last night. I was in the studio recording some music and editing and getting some tracks together. So I had a drummer from Cleveland and a percussionist from New York, or vice versa, and had a bass player come in and lay down 22 amazing tracks so that I can build on some really amazing music over the next couple of years. So
very cool.
So that's always exciting for me. Like, I love giving and helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
But when I get time in the studio, and I was actually up really late last night because I kept listening to all the tracks again and again and again and again. So I got to bed really late. But the way that my body works, because I'm so devoid of stress on the internal level, if I get 3.5, 4 hours of sleep, I'm ready to go.
Amazing. And that's only what you got last night, 3.5 to 4 hours?
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Wow. I'm super curious to jump right in with you. However, I do always ask 3 very simple questions at the beginning of each podcast to just kind of pick our listeners up of where you are at. And so the 3 questions are: number 1, where are you located? Number 2, what time is it? And number 3, what have you been up to this morning up to the point of recording the podcast with me today?
Okay, so it is 3:05 p.m. I'm in Marina del Rey, California, right on the ocean front. And today I have been on some business calls, which was a really great call with a buddy of mine named Jesse Davis. He owns a website. He owns a business called Busy Sites, and he's going to help me create a larger reach so I can generate and create more impact for others. And then I've been up listening to music, the music we created last night. So it's been a very sort of easy morning for me. Mm-hmm. And then I was on the phone with a guy named Christian Holden, who is a lawyer of mine in Texas, and going over some things that are sort of important, some companies that I'm going to be hiring. I wanted him to overlook those contracts and make sure this is a good investment of my time and my energy, and that I'm aligned with them in terms of their value system. So it was all good. It was all focused towards everything that I love to do, right? Business, music, and impact.
Very cool. And so pick us up how you start your day when you only had 3.5 to 4 hours of sleep. Do you just roll out of bed and just start work, or do you have kind of a morning routine in place?
Morning routine. My routine is very simple. I roll out of bed and I walk straight into my shower. Actually, no, that's not the truth. I get up, I go to the kitchen, I grab a glass of water, 4 ounces, okay? And I drink that on my way back to the bathroom, and I shower. Nice. That is the start of my day. Because for me, water is so cleansing, right? Mm-hmm. So whatever debris or anything I picked up from being in an exhaustive dream, it's gone. I'm awake, I'm ready to go, I'm fired up, and I'm excited.
Nice. Very cool. So, I read your bio and I was really excited to have you on the podcast today because of your background and obviously also about what you do today. And I want to start with where everything started for you. So you were a Navy SEAL, like in, I guess a former career of yours. And I want to kind of talk about how you got into that and what that experience was like for you.
I got into that. A brother of mine had a biannual magazine about SEAL training and the SEAL teams. And it was in his basement. And I picked it up. And on the front cover were 7 boat crews of guys. And a boat crew is 7 guys running along carrying a light pole, right? A wooden, right, light post on their shoulder running down the beach. And there was the water was in the background. You could see there was grunt on their faces, sand all over them. And I thought, these people will be able to challenge me. And I read the magazine from back to front. And 6 weeks later, I was gone. I was headed into the military and eventually would, that would take about a year and 4 months. And then I would be seated in SEAL training in Coronado, California.
Wow. And you said something very interesting, which was you read through this magazine and thought they can actually challenge me. Was that something that you've always been looking for in your life?
Yeah, for sure. So when I left, I went to a privately well-endowed boarding school in Hershey, Pennsylvania, called Milton Hershey School. And they gave me a fine education. And I chose to go to school where my coaches were, right? My swim coach, he went to Shippensburg University. My track coach went to Shippensburg University. But to be honest with you, the school wasn't challenging enough for me, right? And so I really was I was going through the motions and not really showing up for class. I was spending more time developing my social skills. And at some point, one of the administrators sat me down and said, look, based on your entrance exams to get into the school, your grades, these things don't match. So do you really want to be here? And at the time, I was sort of like offended. But as I look back retrospectively, I think he did the best thing he could have by me because he helped me to recognize that I wasn't being challenged there. And so I left. I decided to go open up a business. So I took some of my resources and I opened up a sandwich shop called the Hoagie King. Very cool. And I was in that business for about 6 months. And then I got tired of getting up and driving early in the morning to pick up cold cut meats and cheeses and breads and bring them back to the shop. And I thought, I'm too young for this. And by chance, I got to read that magazine. And then I was waiting. I'm the type of person that when something comes to me, I know it immediately. I know whether or not it's a yes. And I can turn left in 0.2 seconds. Okay. So if I met, for instance, if I met somebody at the airport and they were like, hey, listen, I've got this property in Alaska, and I think it'd be very good for you to come build a center up there. And if I felt in the moment that that was the right thing to do, I would be moved out of Los Angeles within 5 or 6 days. Like whenever, I don't know if you're a God person, I'm a God person. I feel like whenever God is talking to me, he always makes the messages really loud and super clear. And then I always turn and pivot immediately. I'm willing to leave everything behind to get to where I'm ready to go next. I've always been like that. I'll always be like that. I always like things to be different. I always like things to be challenging.
And so how long is the Navy SEAL training?
The training, typically, if you get there, you could probably work yourself through there about 9 months.
Okay.
It took me a bit longer. I dealt with a misdiagnosis by a doctor who diagnosed me with proleptic, what do you call it? Proleptic epilepsy. And that set me back. That set me back like 4 or 5 months. So I had to wait to go through what's called the physical evaluation board. And when I got there, I gave them the information that they needed, and they overrode the doctor's decision based on the analysis of the tests that I went and had done on my own to prove that I actually wasn't a probable epileptic. And I got back into training, and I finished that in about a year and 8 months.
Amazing. And so did it challenge you?
It definitely challenged me. One, it challenged me physically, in the sense that every day there's a huge demand, right? And there's a sign when you get into the courtyard at SEAL training. There's this huge blacktop surface where we do all of our physical activity. And on the left wall, as you're walking in, there's a sign that says the only easy day was yesterday. And they meant it. Like, whoever painted that sign, they had clear intent. And
Mm,
so every day their job is to increase the stress load that they're putting top of you so
mm,
that you can continue to keep responding and build toward, how do I say this? Build through these challenges that they're giving you every day. And every day the challenge is larger in some way, whether it's physically, whether it's mentally, whether it's emotionally, whether it's energetically.
mm,
And so by the time I got out of SEAL training, I felt unstoppable.
mm,
And I knew when I picked up that certificate and walked across the stage, my graduation certificate, my diploma, that I had a right to choose whatever I wanted to do in the world. Like, for me, that was my rite of passage. If you look into
mm,
all ancient cultures, you'll find that at some point in a young man's life, whether he's 14 or 13 or 15 or 16 years old, he had to go through what was called the rite of passage. And SEAL training was my rite of passage to understand that moving forward, I was the creator of my own reality. And once a human understands that, they're unstoppable in whatever pursuits that they have, as long as those pursuits are aligned with them ethically, morally, and in terms of their principles, values, and
mm,
ethics.
mm,
And so SEAL training gave me a very powerful position, to a very powerful platform emotionally and internally to bridge from, right? To
mm,
come, I had a very powerful place to come from.
mm. Yeah, for sure. And how old were you when you took that training?
I was 21 years old when I arrived.
Okay. And so pick us up a little bit in terms of what it like, you were saying it's, really difficult and challenging physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Were you aware of stress management at the time and like, putting these different stressors on you on a
No.
regular basis? Like, how did you manage that, right? Especially from a mental perspective, I'm actually really curious because I think everything goes through our mind. Like even all
Yeah.
of the physical strenuous things that you're doing there, right? Like it's about having the right mindset of pushing and pushing and pushing. So how was that trained? Was it trained through the physical space
Uh,
or
the
what were
way
maybe
that
one of yeah.
I got it. The way that I managed my stress was very simple.
Mhm.
When SEAL training was over, I went home. So, uh, what I decided is everyone in SEAL training lives on the base. It's called the Naval Special Warfare Center, right? And there's half of the base is set up for SEAL training. The other half of the base is set up for the SEAL teams. And we lived in a barracks called 618. And after about 6 weeks to 8 weeks of being in SEAL training, I met a lovely young woman, and we decided spontaneously to move in together. So when I got off work, I went to a real life,
Mhm.
right? Meaning I had someone who was caring, loving. Um, every morning before I went to work, there was always a letter in my backpack from her to
Mhm.
tell me that I was important, that I was valuable, how much she cared about me. And she showered me with so much love and care that when I was home on the weekends, I had time to recover. And she always knew that if you're tired, sleep. And so she gave me a lot of space to recover on the weekends, and she gave me a really powerful home life in
Mhm.
order to feel really good about myself and to feel really good about the world. So
Mhm.
in
So
terms of
interesting.
stress management, did I have techniques? Absolutely not. But what I did had is I had someone who loved and cared about me 1000%.
Mhm.
And then I ate good foods on the weekend. I got a lot of rest. And when it was time to go back to work on Monday, it was great because she drove me to work every day. So I started my day with leaving her, right? And I ended my day with her picking me up, right? Like she totally set me up to be successful in that experience. So that was my stress management. That was the only thing that I had going on. I was also very vested in reading and educating myself. So I read some books about fasting and cleansing, and I always loved going to health food stores. And so I was doing some other things that other guys probably weren't doing in SEAL training. I was drinking little potions and being really mindful of all the things that I was eating. And I was eating really good quality food on the weekends. That was the totality of my stress management. I was in a state, what you would call stress ignorance. So for me, in the work that I do, there's really 3 lanes that you can be in. Stress ignorance, which is where most of the population is, right? You can be in what's called negative stress management or positive stress management, or you can be in the lane that I own, which is called stress resolution, right? And that means that I have the ability to remove the stressors that are in my body, whether it's my physical body, my emotional body, my mental body, or my energetic body, and those stressors don't come back, right? Because I've reduced my lifetime accumulated stress load so much that I can take on intense amounts of stress and it has next to no effect on me. Okay, like you can look at me, right? I'm going to be 60 soon.
Wow.
Okay. And I ran my engine hot. That means that I was always pushing the envelope at everything that I was doing. So usually when you have guys and gals that like to push the envelope like that, well, they look like they've been pushing the envelope, right? And so I look young, I feel young, I am way younger chronologically, biologically than I am chronologically. So basically, when you reduce your lifetime accumulated stress load, you have the ability to stop the aging process.
So, okay. So I want to kind of go back in times just so we understand how you got to that point. So, you finish your training and what do you do next?
Then I go to the SEAL teams, right? And in the SEAL teams, I got into a different type of what we call stress management, right? And that was drinking alcohol. Right? I managed my stress with excessively working out and partying the second I got off work. Okay. Because at some point, what happened is when I got in the SEAL team, my relationship with this lovely young woman ended. Right. I wasn't present. I wasn't focused. I had changed so much internally. I basically become hardened in a certain way. And that wasn't going to be a productive relationship for her or me because I was absent emotionally now. And so in my state of emotional absence, I used alcohol and promiscuity as a means of dealing with my stress. And so I was in what I would call negative stress management, right? Okay. I'm taking in substances and I'm exploring behaviors that are reducing not only my internal core energy, but I'm also reducing and lowering my inner self-esteem and my ethics, my morals, my values, and my principles. So I was definitely in negative stress management.
And when did you realize that it was negative stress management for your own well-being?
When I got pain in my body, that was the indication. I was at the time, I was in stress ignorance, right? And so I wasn't consciously, there was no looking to change the narrative because the narrative was telling me that I was important, I was valuable, right? And so until I had pain in my body, that was when I had to start to second guess, like what's really going on. And the pain was debilitating. So at some point, I started losing my hearing. When my vision started to go, it started to go very quickly. And I had pain at every joint in my body. And so the good thing about pain is once it gets into the center of your body where mine got, and at the time that I was in a very tragic car accident, wasn't happy about it. But when I look back, thank God for that accident, because that accident put the pain directly into the center of my hip where I could never ignore it. And so it was all constantly throbbing. And so I had to reach out for help. I had to reach out for help. And that was a big moment for me because I dealt with a lot of childhood trauma. My mom committed suicide when I was 7 years old. She was dealing with a lot of stress. Her father died of cirrhosis of the liver. So you could see there was already a chain or a path that you could follow of mental illness, right? And so I had no idea that those experiences as a child were unresolved, right? And they were going to be impacting me much later. The way they impacted me the most is I became hyper independent as my strategy for success. So that meant I could take care of everything I needed to take care of on my own. I didn't need anyone, which also meant you could never tell me what to do or how to do it, because I could tell you to piss off and I could figure it out all on my own. So here I am operating as a lone wolf, and my winning strategy is hyper independence. And now I have to be in a vulnerable enough state to actually reach out my hand and ask for help. Fortunate enough for me, there was a guy that I valued highly as a friend, and I called him up and he came and he gave me some education on some things that I was unaware of. And he gave me at least a path to start investigating that could begin to produce some results that I would consider to be successful. And at the time, those tiny results that I was getting, they seemed like big results, right? So I was doing Feldenkrais, I was doing the Egoscue method, I was doing acupuncture, acupressure, Rolfing, Heller work, hot yoga. I was doing everything that I could. And I thought that, hey, look, if I synergistically connect all these things together and I synthesize these systems, what it's going to produce for me is a bigger, better result. And then at the end of the day, if if I get 7 different screwdrivers and I need a sledgehammer, those 7 different screwdrivers are never going to be a replacement for that sledgehammer. And what I needed, because my root-based traumas and stressors were so deeply embedded into my body, I needed a sledgehammer. I needed to meet someone who understood more than all of them put together. And fortunate enough for me, I went to a boarding school, as I told you earlier. A guy named Mark Pershpalaja sent me an email. And the email said, look, I found this guy in Good Morning America. He's got 5 stretches that'll change your life. At the time, I'm thinking, my life's already changing. Piss off. Go change your own life, right? And you can see when you're in a hyper-dependent state, that means you also have a well-defended emotional structure, right? So staying in a state of vulnerability or taking advice from other people goes against the narrative that you've created in order to be successful and continues to feed your false identity. So fortunate enough for me, there was a woman that was one of my clients that I trusted at the time. Her name was Madi. She was an esthetician in San Diego. She gave me a call and I picked up my phone. I wonder why she's calling. She calls, she goes, hey, I just saw this guy in Good Morning America. I said, oh my God, let me guess. He's got 5 stretches that'll change my life. And she goes, you saw the program? And I went, no, but I get the point. So I got on the internet. I started researching, right? Took me 6 months to track this guy down. I tried all the positions he had available on the internet. I couldn't get into any one of these things. I made the assumption that all these people were born like this, and this really wasn't for me. And then one morning, I woke up and I decided whoever created the 5-day work week, that person, we should go back in time and we should have a really deep, interesting conversation with that person. How about we talk you into how about a 3.5-day work week? And then we have 3.5 days to investigate all the other aspects of ourselves, our emotional development, our spiritual development, our energetic development, our psychological mental development versus this work, work, work model.
Mm.
And then I had the idea, great, I got it. I'm getting rid of working on Fridays. I'm no longer working on Fridays. The first Friday, I woke up in the morning, I looked up, the sun was coming into my bedroom. I looked at the ceiling and I said, look, what more can I do? And I heard this little voice that said, call him right now. He'll pick up the phone. Sat at my desk, picked up the phone. I called him, he answered the phone. He goes, hello, how can I help you? And I thought, who talks like that? And then I laid it down for him. What kind of business model do you run? I've been tracking you down for 6 months. You don't respond to my emails. You don't respond to my phone calls. And the guy basically said, whoa, I recently got back from the Olympics. Okay. I've been working on my stretching method and growing my organic garden. I'm thinking this guy is trying to grow a jungle in the hillsides of San Jose. This doesn't make any sense to me.
Uh-huh.
And then we had basically about an hour to an hour and a half conversation, and he agreed to call me back in 3 days. And we scheduled some time to get together. So I went up to see him in the foothills of San Jose, and he started removing tension and stress from my body. He worked on me, 6 to 8 hours a day for 4 days in a row. And when I got back
Wow.
on the flight to go home, when I landed, well, first, when I got to the airport, I realized something was different. When I got on the plane, I could see something was dramatically different. And when I got home and I started working with my clients again, I could tell something was very different about the way that I was relating with them.
Mm.
And so then I started to put 2 plus 2 together. The removal of tension and stress also changes you emotionally, but also psychologically.
Mm.
And then I called him on my way home from that first group workout that I had with these ladies in De Anza Cove, San Diego, a women's group that I ran on Wednesday nights. And I said, look, da 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 da. He just started laughing. And he goes, you get it. You pieced it together, right? You remove tension, stress, and distortion from the physical body. And what happens is you get access to these higher levels of consciousness, but these higher levels of energy, but also these higher levels of understanding and relating.
Mm.
And I was relating in a completely different fashion. And that was the start of a really powerful journey. And then I basically took all of the skills that I gained from SEAL training and SEAL teams into discipline, and I turned SEAL training into HEAL training. And I worked on myself 5 to 6 hours for 7 years. And I put all of that intensity into figuring out how far could you really take this? Like, how much tension could you remove? How much change could you potentially get? And could we create instantaneous permanent change for someone? And I went on a journey for 7 years, and I looked under every rock and every stone, and I compared and contrasted through scientific evaluation what were the impacts of the things that I was doing, and would those impacts be also good for other people?
Mm. Wow, such a cool story. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Very
Oh,
powerful. And so, one of the things that I love that you already kind of explained at the beginning was that your focus is basically on stress resolution and versus stress management. Can you tell us more about how you got to that point and how we resolve stress versus just manage it and what the difference is?
yeah, I mean, well, I think it'd be beneficial if we went over all 4 phases, because the
Great.
most
Let's do
important
it.
thing is to get, obviously, your listeners are listening to you and you talk about stress. So
Yeah.
they're interested in moving from stress ignorance, right,
Mhm. Mhm.
into stress awareness.
Mhm.
Okay. So the first bit is admitting, like, every single person has a symptom, whether you've got a runny nose every winter, or your eyes get dry during the fall season, or you have intermittent poor sleep patterns, or you have intense menstrual cramps, or you wake up and you never feel rested, right?
Mhm.
These are basic symptoms, right? And then you got people who deal with like bigger symptoms, right?
Mhm.
And so how do we get from stress ignorance into stress awareness? It's having a clear, honest assessment of yourself and to know what is an outcome of unresolved stress. Headaches, outcome of unresolved stress. Okay. Bad breath. Okay. Uh, Systemic issues. What's a systemic issue? Pancreatic. Somebody is insulin dependent, right? So the pancreas is working correctly. They have digestive issues. They have elimination issues. They got constipation. They have poor eyesight. They have poor hearing. They have poor smell. They have poor taste. Like all these are all markers for you to stop and go, oh, I had no idea that that was being caused by unresolved stress. So now you've gone from stress ignorance into stress awareness because you're willing to be honest with yourself. So the most important quality to develop is inner honesty. There's outer honesty. I could care less about that. What I care about is whether or not you're being honest with yourself. Did you wake up and feel exhausted? When you went to that meeting and you had to speak, were you suffering from debilitating anxiety 2 days before, knowing you were going to be called onto a platform to share all the information that you gather for the benefit of the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have pain in your body? Does your neck hurt? Is it stiff? Is your back stiff? Are your shoulders stiff? Do you have chronic? Do you have intermittent pain? Like, what's going on? Like, you have to be able to do an honest inner assessment of how you move through the world. The easiest thing is your energy consistent and abundant at all times, right?
Yeah.
Is your mind clear and confident at all times? Are your emotions grounded and excitable? Okay. And is your body mechanically efficient? And are you comfortable and strong? Okay. If you're missing any one of these things, you're obviously stressed because the only thing that can take you from excitement into anxiety is unresolved stress. The only thing that can take you from a clear mind into a state of confusion is unresolved stress. The only thing that can take you from a comfortable body to a body full of pain is unresolved stress. And the only thing that can take you from a righteous person who's aligned to their ethics, moral values, and principles into a self-righteous position is if you're severely overstressed. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you're a listener on the call, I'm giving you the markers for you to go, oh man, you know what? Mm-hmm. I do get self-righteous. I do judge people, right? I am overly critical of myself, right? I often put myself in an overly moralizing position and I preach to others. All right. Mm-hmm. So if you can be honest with yourself, you have an opportunity to shift from stress ignorance into stress awareness. And the question is, how do I get from stress awareness into positive stress management? Right. Because if we look around the world, what we see is what I call the daily drugs. The daily drugs are what you would call acceptable forms of medication, right? That are in current society. Caffeine, an acceptable form of self-medication, right? Nicotine, an acceptable form of self-medication. Alcohol, an acceptable form of self-medication. Now, marijuana, an acceptable form of self-medication. And then you have pharmaceutical drugs and all of the recreational drugs, right? So those are tools we would call those negative stress management tools, right?
Do you count sugar as one of them too?
Oh, that sugar is number one, right? And the reason why it's number one is this, and most people have no clue about this. The reason why people are attracted to sugar is because they lack the ability to communicate clearly what their desires, wants, and needs are, right? Because every organ in your body has a particular aspect of consciousness in that, right? The pancreas and the spleen are all about clear communication to my benefit and to the benefit of others, which means to nurture others and myself equally, right? When someone lacks the ability to either authentically self-express or communicate clearly to their behalf or to the behalf of those they care about, they then look to take on the taste of sweet, which is sugar. right? So they're avoiding building communication skills by just eating sweet things.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a sweet hound on the call, I was a sweet hound. All right. If you're a
I
sweet
love
hound,
sweets. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
addicted to them.
right. And that's how you're managing your stress. You
Mm.
might as well know the
Yeah.
reason why you're doing it, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then you can self-correct, find a course somewhere in the world. There's probably something on YouTube, how to communicate clearly to your own benefit, how to be authentically self-expressed. If you can build those skills, your attraction to sugar is going to disappear overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now we're looking at people, and we're talking about, well, okay, we've got negative stress management tools, right? How do we get into positive stress management tools? That means you have to reduce your addiction to negative stress management tools. How
Mm-hmm.
do I do that? Well, look, take your time. Take one of your negative stress management tools and reduce it by half every week until it no longer has a foothold on you, and replace the ritual, right? So if your thing is, hey, I'm a construction worker, right? I've been banging on nails all day long. I got dust in my face. Okay, I got a long drive home, a long drive to work, a long drive back. When I get home, I just want to have a beer and have some peace and quiet and turn on some sports. Maintain the ritual, but maybe you get your beer, but you get non-alcoholic beer,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you still have the taste, you have the flavor, you have the drink, you maintain the ritual. If you're someone who needs a cup of coffee before you get in the shower because you feel so exhausted, maintain the ritual. The next week, have the same cup of coffee, half the amount. The next week, have half that amount,
Mm-hmm.
and then replace it with some form of herbal tea. Like, maintain your rituals. Your
Mm-hmm.
rituals are important. They're part of your morning routine. It was one of the first questions you asked me. It was basically, you were asking is, what's your morning ritual?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get going? How do you set up your day? Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you end your day? Maybe you're the type of person at the end of the day, you got to have a glass of wine. Reduce the consumption by half, still have a ritual. Okay, now we're shifting from negative stress management tools and positive stress management tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if my negative stress management tool, which is funny because I'm going to say this, and most people would make this assumption, exercise, right? If you're exercising more than 30 to 45 minutes a day, you're shifting into a state of diminishing returns, which means now you're stealing more energy than you're getting from that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The point is to evolve. So, yeah, go exercise. But now, guess what? Instead of being there for 2 hours, you know what you have time to do? You have time to meditate, right? You have time to do some breath work because now you got an hour of time back. So now you've shifted from a negative stress management tool, right? Excessive exercise, into a positive stress management tool, which is now meditation or breath work.
Mm-hmm.
Or what could be better than taking your partner, holding their hand, and going for a nice long walk and communicating about how your day was, right? What
Mm-hmm.
your fears are, right? What your insecurities are. So now we're shifting into positive stress management tools. If you shift from negative stress management tools into positive stress management tools, your reward is you will have more energy, you'll have less anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Your mind will have more clarity, all right? And your body will be more comfortable. When you're using the daily drugs and excessive exercise, right? Or excessive work, okay? You are diminishing your lifetime accumulated stress. So think about it like this. Every person who came to Earth, they got a bank account of energy. You don't get any more, you don't get any less. But what happens is when you're using negative stress management tools, you're burning through that lifetime accumulated bank account that you have of energy, and you're burning up the capital rather than using the interest. I'm going to say this again. You're burning up the capital as opposed to using the interest.
Mm.
You can only take so much of your capital and reduce it before you no longer produce interest. And when you're no longer producing interest, guess what you get? You get a symptom. And what's your symptom? Dry eyes. What's your symptom? Dry lips. What's your symptom? Foul body odor. What's your symptom? Constipation. What's your symptom? Intense menstrual cramps. What's your symptom? Intermittent headaches. What's your symptom? Migraines that last for hours, right? Debilitating migraines. Okay. And so if people don't understand that there's a cost, they will continue to line up and manage their stress load with negative stress management tools. And no matter how much clever advertising is done, at the end of the day, give me someone who's been drinking water and fresh juice and herbal formulas for 40 years and then hand me an alcoholic and let's take some pictures, right? The proof is in the pudding, right? This young woman who's been on this path, her skin is going to be supple, her whites of her eyes are going to be clear, her breath is going to smell fresh, her posture is going to be erect. The person who's been pounding on all the alcohol or the caffeine or all the sugar, they're going to be getting dried out, right? Because those are all diuretics. They dry your system out and you start losing massive amounts of moisture.
Mm.
Right? When you start losing moisture and you start getting dry, your electrical signals moving through your body they have to work harder. So now your brain has to work harder to simply get your whole system to function. So the only way to get into stress resolution is to first get into positive stress management tools. But in order to do that, you have to reduce your addiction to negative stress management tools. Again, what would those be? Nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, refined white or brown sugar, recreational, pharmaceutical drugs, excessive exercise, excessive work, pornography, prostitution, right? We could sit here for shopping, right?
Yeah.
We could name those for hours, but at the end of the day, you have to reduce your addiction to them. And then when you employ these positive stress management tools, the results are evident. The results are obvious because now you have more energy, you're more present, you feel more love, you're naturally more receptive, you're less protective, and abundance and opportunities, they flow to you through effortless effort and ease and grace. So if you want to stay in struggle and strife, maintain your addiction to negative stress management tools. If you want to get into ease and grace, okay, and effortless effort, then you have to reduce your addiction to negative stress management tools. Now, I'm having a different conversation. What I'm saying is, I've created a system. Before I was born, it was impossible for someone to reduce their lifetime accumulated stress load, right? So basically, I've synthesized all these systems out there, gathered the best from what's already been created, and then managed to generate and create my own on top of that, and then create some of my own systems so that we could reduce your lifetime accumulated stress load, which is made up of all of the unresolved generational stress you got from your parents, okay? All of the daily stress that you picked up and your genetic and epigenetic predisposition. Once we reduce that by 50%, your restore, repair, and recovery rate raises 50%. So that means when I sleep 6 hours, it's like sleeping 9 hours. When I sleep 4 hours, it's like sleeping 8 hours. I sleep 3 hours, it's like getting 6 hours. Okay? When my lifetime accumulated stress load is high, my restore, repair, and recovery rate is very low. I get 9 hours and I wake up, I still feel tired. If you're waking up in the morning and you don't pop out of bed, right? You're looking for that alarm, okay? It's because your lifetime accumulated stress load is too high. The question is, how do you reduce that?
Mm-hmm.
I've created very specific techniques that I teach you how to do on your own. So there is no codependent, dependent relationship between me and the people that I inspire, mentor, coach, and train.
Mm-hmm. And are these related physically or mentally, or like, can you give us maybe one or two examples?
Yeah. This is easy. So they can be physical. So I have a system called Bestercise, which is the best form of exercise. The reason why I call it best is because best stands for bio, energetic, self, transformational sequences.
Mm-hmm.
And these are forms of exercise that you do where you're using concentric, isometric, and eccentric contractions all in conjunction to activate tissue, stretch that tissue, and reduce the stress that's in that tissue, right? Activate tissue, strengthen tissue, and stretch that tissue. And you go through this cycle over and over and over again. And then suddenly all of your tissue opens up. Well, guess what's in your tissues, right? You've got vascular tissue that flows through there. You've got lymphatic tissue, and you have nervous tissue, right? So electricity, right? Moisture and cleansers, right? If you choke in and generate a massive amount of tension, you're putting too much surrounding pressure on all of those other systems, which reduces your ability, reduces your body's ability to get rid of all the excessive toxicity that we live in today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so these exercises, that are taught to you reduce your lifetime accumulated stress load because we're able to use maximal contractions, right? That's what I talked about earlier when I said a sledgehammer versus 7 screwdrivers.
Mm-hmm.
If I need to take down my garage to build a new one, I don't want to have to use 7 screwdrivers to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to knock it onto the ground within a day. I need a sledgehammer in order to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the eccentric force, all right, is the sledgehammer. But you can't just apply eccentric forces without applying concentric and isometric forces, because you will put your body in a state that's out of balance. So we have different demographics around the world. So if you look at people who do yoga, right, they use passive isometric contractions, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the gym, these guys are using active concentric contractions. And so what's usually left out is the eccentric contraction. So what we want to use is we want to use active isometric, active concentric, and active eccentric all in conjunction to reduce the lifetime accumulated tension that's sitting in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the formula that everyone needs to understand that's studying stress. In order to get stress, you must first have a weakness. But in order to have a weakness, you must first present with a fear, right? You have to have an irrational belief.
Mm-hmm.
That irrational belief or that irrational thought, as it gets thought again and again and again, becomes a limiting belief. When you move from a position of reality into a limiting belief, you leave reality and you step into fantasy. The second you step into fantasy, half of your brain turns off electrically and you shift into a state what's called fight or flight response. So now you're in the protective mode. When my brain, one hemisphere is turned off electrically, okay, well, as I perceive the world, I perceive threats. When my brain is turned on electrically through both hemispheres, I see opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a massive amount of stress creates a tiny bit of tension. And this is the key point of all of this. A massive amount of unresolved stress creates a tiny bit of tension. Imagine how much tension you have to have in order to create structural distortion. That means the bones are rotated in the wrong directions. That means you would have to have a gargantuan amount of unresolved stress
Mm-hmm.
to have a fair amount of physical tension, but that fair amount of physical tension creates a tiny bit of distortion, and all you need is a tiny bit of distortion to live in chronic pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
This is so interesting. And, one of the things that I would love to ask you is, a lot of the people that I work with have very high amounts of work stress, right? They're workaholics, or, they like to work, they like to have that feeling of accomplishment at all times. What do you recommend these people to do in terms of positive stress management techniques and resolution? Because would they
Uh,
just, become aware of that and then reduce the number of hours they work? Possibly,
okay.
right? But
Okay.
yeah, I'd love to have your opinion on that one.
Got it. I mean, well, first they have to look at the belief that they created, right? Right. If your value comes from what you do
Mm-hmm.
versus who you be, then you're always going to be looking to work more because that's where your value comes from. And you have to ask yourself, how do you shift from doing into being?
Mm-hmm.
And I gave the formula earlier where I said you have to reduce your addiction to negative stress management tools. As they start to reduce, guess what's going to happen? Their nervous system's going to access a state of peace and calm,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to start to feel how exhausted they are.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start feeling how exhausted you are, you start questioning whether or not the things that I'm doing are valuable anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to do what I said initially is an honest self-assessment. Okay. Are
Yeah.
you looking for uppers in the morning and you're looking for downers at night?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's where most humans are, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how
Yeah.
they manage their stress load. So without that step, how are they ever going to know how exhausted they are? And if they're unaware of how exhausted they really are, because people, when they first come to see me, right, a lot of them, they come in here, they're flatlined, exhausted, but other people come in here and are like, yeah, my energy's great. The second we start removing tension and stress out of their body, I get a text like 2 weeks later, like, I'm so tired all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, actually,
That's
your
good.
body's so relaxed that you can feel how tired you've been for decades.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that first step is honest self-assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Once you decide, yeah, I want to move into positive stress management tools, and you start to add a couple of those to your day, just even a basic thing of like, wow, I'm starting to feel a little anxiety before this meeting. Go sit in your office for 5 minutes and do some deep breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is there's not enough deep breathing in the world to remove your lifetime accumulated stress load. So rather than you be fooled by that, I'm telling you to use it as a stress management tool.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get into stress resolution, which is reduce your lifetime accumulated stress load so that you could feel exactly where your energy is, then you're going to have to find somebody like me that can teach you how to implement these tools and these strategies so that you can reduce this lifetime accumulated stress on your own. The lucky thing for you is anyone that's on this call, I have free information that you can access, and I give you one of the best exercises. And the first best exercise that I'll teach to everyone is all about reducing fixation,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and obsession, and excessive control and containment strategies. So when you remove the tension that's on the back of your shoulders and around your neck, you're finally going to go, oh my God, I feel so relaxed. And when you're relaxed, you're going to make a different decision. When you're stressed, you make decisions based on the stress load that you have.
Mm-hmm.
All of your decisions are all made by your stress.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what's the obvious choice? Reduce the stress in your body. And as that happens and you get into that state of relaxation, now you can do an honest self assessment around what it is you really want.
Mm-hmm.
And I question anyone who gets all of their esteem from doing something outside. That can only take you so far. There's a ceiling, I promise you, that you will reach. All right. No matter how successful you are, where you start questioning yourself, by the time you get there, it's because you have some kind of ailment that you can't get over, right? You got the CEO that suddenly goes in for a doctor's checkup and they're like, hey, Mike, look, we got some good news for you. We think we can help you, but we also have some bad news. You're going to have an operation within the next 4 days because we have to put some stents in your heart because your ejection fraction rate is too low. Okay. Or you're not getting enough consistent blood supply, or your arteries are so clogged that, we have to do some different things here. As the operation, he goes home, his wife has a conversation. He goes, Mike, do you really think you should be going to work any longer? I mean, we have all the resources we need. We're in a really good position. We own our home. What's the point of doing that? If all of his identity comes from his work, he will go back to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Where you were mentioning all of those different materials, what is the website that they can find all of that on?
The website, you would go to truebodyintelligence.com. Okay. And on the website, you would fill out either a quiz or you would email support@truebodyintelligence.com. And you would tell them, hey, I was on this podcast and I heard there's some free information, some free tools for me to access. And I will give all those links to you so that they're present for them to tag.
Perfect.
And once you go there and you go to support@truebodyintelligence.com, I'll have a conversation with anyone as long as they take the first step, which is read my book, which is called Free for Life, The Navy SEAL's Unique Path to Inner Freedom and Outer Peace. Like, you have to jump through some hoops. You have to have some vested interest.
Amazing.
Okay.
Thank you so much. This is so interesting and I would love to continue speaking, but we're up on time for today. So I think it's a good point to let people just, sit with all of the information that you shared with us today and then hopefully reach out to you via the website and all of the different resources that you mentioned. I'll obviously make sure to leave all of these in the show notes below. So Christopher, thank you so much for being here with us today. And I wish you a really wonderful rest of your day, a happy Thanksgiving, a good holiday, and obviously a very successful career in the future.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure to be here to share. Thank you for opening the platform that you created for me to assist and share what I have to offer that I know will be valuable for people.
Thank you.